Welcome back, everyone. As you can see on this episode of my Prog Rock show, I have two very special guests. I have Bruce Pegg, music author of Welcome Back, My Friends, The People's Guide to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And we also have the keyboardist for Emerson, Lake and Palmer tribute band Manticore, Mr. Rob Shepard. And I'm just a guy who makes videos in his basement, so we're going to hear what these two have to say. All right, first of all, I want to thank you two for coming down to the Prog basement. I've invited many people. I get turned down a lot, so you were the first brave people to actually come down here for an interview.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah, lovely venue. Your artwork is incredible. I love your art collection.
I appreciate it, and it's being put to good use today for sure. So we have a lot going on today. We got a lot of things to talk about in this episode. I want to kind of go back a little bit. Bruce, you and I met about a year ago.
About a year ago, yeah, at Penns Peak in Pennsylvania to see Carl Palmer's Emerson, Lake and Palmer Legacy. I think that's what they're now called.
Yes.
And an incredible tribute to Emerson, Lake and Palmer with Paul Bielatowicz on guitar and Simon Fitzpatrick on channel stick and bass, and along with, of course, Carl Palmer. And an incredible show that I don't know. I really enjoyed not just the nostalgic aspect of it and the video of Carl playing with Greg and Keith, but also the way that they're starting to, I think, morph it into something different and unique. So that was my impression of the show.
Oh, it was fantastic, yeah. And I did a video. It's actually my most popular video.
Is that right?
That I did.
Yeah.
Got almost 1,800 views. It's still climbing.
Yeah. Wow.
So that one did very well. But I remember meeting you up in the bar area.
Yep.
And then after the show, I'm like, I better catch this guy before he goes because we should, exchange contact information. At that point, you told me that you're working on a book.
Yeah. Yeah. We just started work on it just prior to that show. And worked on it steadily all the way through last year, and by October we had this right there.
And this book is out now.
The book is out now. There's two different editions. You can get one through Burning Shed, which is the UK distributor. That's more expensive. That's the exclusive edition, the hardback edition, numbered limited edition, and then you can get, if you're in the US, you can also get a hold of the regular edition. Which I think just came out at the end of last month. So,
all right, so let's talk about this book a little bit. I mean, there's many bands out there. There's many prog bands out there, but why Emerson, Lake and Palmer first of all?
Well, actually, it was something that I was asked to do by Spenwood. Spenwood Books is a publishing company out of Manchester, England, which is run by an old college friend of mine, Richard Houghton. And I'd done a book for him a couple of years previously, which is a people's history of the De Montfort Hall, which is the concert hall in Leicester, England, where I grew up and saw many, many great acts. Unfortunately, not Emerson, Lake and Palmer at that time. And then Richard was looking to do this book. He contacted Emerson, Lake and Palmer's management, and they were behind it. Carl was okay with it, and the Lake and Emerson estates were fine with it. And I'm like Richard's resident prog guy. He has various guys that write about punk and all the other musical genres. And Rich said to me, "Do you want to do the project?" I said, "Sign me up. I'll do it."
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of talking about the setup of this book, so it's the People's Guide.
Right.
So what does this mean that it's the People's Guide?
Well, it's people's history, and what it means is this is an alternative view of the band and the music. So rather than have a historian write it, and this was the band at this point in time, and this is the album they released, and this was the tour. What we do is we go out and solicit fans of the band to actually talk about their experiences meeting the band, seeing a show, or in Rob's case, as you'll hear in a minute, how encountering Emerson, Lake and Palmer's music changed their life and put them on a certain trajectory in their life. And so you get this very different perspective of what the band was, what it meant to people, and also it enables you to see the band as like these little snapshots at various periods in their career.
Mm-hmm.
So just a different perspective, a different way of seeing it.
Yeah, and what's a band without the fans?
Absolutely.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And to give them a little credit. And we'll talk more about this.
Sure.
But I want to bring Rob into this a little bit. So being the keyboardist of a tribute band for Emerson, Lake and Palmer. How did you two meet, first of all? It's just a little bit of it's a little history there, so if we can get into that, if you don't mind, and your connection to the book.
Actually, we met because of the book. I usually don't get involved. Like people are, they'll post on Facebook asking for what was your first experience with ELP, this and that. But I happened to see that somebody was writing a fan book that they wanted stories of how ELP affected their lives or concert experiences, and I've had a bunch of experiences with the band and with Keith Emerson and people connected with the band, and because of what I do. But I had a story to tell which I thought was really interesting, and it was different from a regular fan story because this involved, and without telling the whole story, but it involved me getting into Hofstra University and playing Trilogy as my entrance exam to get into Hofstra. But it wasn't just playing Trilogy. So the guy that was running the music program for Hofstra University was a professor named Herbert Deutsch. And anybody who is familiar with the Moog synthesizer and knows the history of Moog knows that Herb Deutsch was actually one of the co-inventors of the Moog synthesizer with Bob Moog. So when I went into audition with Trilogy at 18 years old, and I walk in with my little octave Cat synthesizer, which I put on top of the grand piano to do the audition, and he's looking at me like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing Trilogy by ELP." Whatever. In back of me, in a huge glass case, was the prototype Monster Moog synthesizer, the Beast.
The modular, they call
it. The modular.
Yeah.
It just didn't connect with me. I was focused on what I was doing, not realizing who I was performing for. He knew Keith Emerson. He knew Bob Moog. He knew all of this stuff. I thought I was doing something that was unique, and I didn't know who I was doing this for, or where I was. So I just noticed the synthesizer in back of me, and in any case, so this was my story and my initial connection with ELP, and I thought it would just be an interesting enough story, and I connected with Bruce through that, and it turned out that he lives maybe 15 minutes from the house that we're going to be living in when I sell my house on Long Island. So he's a neighbor.
Yeah,
a future neighbor.
Just purely by coincidence.
Wow.
So, but it was such a great story, and we had a little email exchange after that, and found out all this stuff about how close we were geographically. So we've become friends because of the book, and that's a great. I think Rob's story is a great example of what makes these kinds of books, because Spenwood has published a number of books about the Who, David Bowie, the Clash, all over the musical spectrum. But what makes it unique is that kind of story where you see somebody's life changing because of this stuff, and Rob's gone on to become a very fine musician. And one of the things that I learned as I started to gather these stories is just how much Emerson, Lake and Palmer, probably more than any other band I can think of, has led people to either become musicians, become not just pick up a guitar and strum a few chords kind of musicians, but honest to goodness professional musicians, working musicians, but also people that have either come to love or come to more deeply appreciate classical music as well. And there's so many stories in the book of people like that who just have Emerson, Lake and Palmer enriched their lives in some very fundamental ways.
And I don't even know if I'd be here doing these videos if it wasn't for Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
And as you can see behind us, it's a wall of Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're moving into the area as well, because Ithaca not being too far from here, in Trumansburg, and this is where the Moog synthesizer was born.
Right. Yeah.
And I did get a chance to go up to Trumansburg, a little town, and see the little Italian restaurant that's there, where the Moog synthesizer and musicians would come in and out of. They'd be able to test these things. It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the process of the book and kind of putting this book together.
Yeah.
And getting all these stories and compiling them. And
Yeah.
tell us about that.
Well, it's as my name is on the book, but it's really not my book. It's the fans' book. My job in all of this was to first of all collect the stories. So somebody like Rob would send in a story, and I would have to evaluate it to see if it's something that I think adds to the story, so to speak. Because so many people would send in a story and say, "Well, I saw them in 1977." Okay, all right. Where do we go from there? But it's the stories like Rob's that make the cut, that go into the final product. And then a lot of my job is to a number of things. First of all, I had to verify the stories. I had somebody, for example, write in and say, Emerson, Lake and Palmer played a second warm-up show before the Isle of Wight festival. Well, they didn't. It turns out the guy had his dates wrong. So I had to do a little due diligence and make sure, verify it with other sources. And sometimes the stories perhaps aren't written very well, so I have to work with the person and say, hey, can you flesh this out a little bit more? Can you say a little bit more about meeting Greg Lake after a show one night or whatever? And then then the editor in me comes in, because that's my professional job is as an editor. So I work with them on grammar and punctuation and all the nitty-gritty English stuff, and that becomes difficult because, as you know, the book. The solicitation for stories went all over the world. So we're getting stories from Poland, we're getting stories from Colombia, and Brazil, and so I have to make sense of all of that stuff as well. And then the final part of my part in this whole process is to stitch that all together into some kind of coherent narrative. So I do the introduction, which attempts to put Emerson, Lake and Palmer in their place in music history, and then tell the story briefly of the more formal story, when the albums were released, when the tours occurred, that kind of thing. Which I don't do it in great detail in these books, because I figure if people want that, there's other better resources to go to. So this then becomes a complement to the official formal history of the band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to fill in the gaps, as you said, we were talking earlier about the amount of Emerson, Lake and Palmer books that are out there. Yeah. And you can get their biographies, autobiographies. Yeah. There's all kinds of information about this band, and to get the fans' perspective and to fill in the little tiny gaps that people may have missed. That's right. Is just such a different way of doing this, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Give you an example of that. We were talking about the surround sound version of brain salad surgery that you have. And back in the day, they pioneered one of the quad sound systems, them and Pink Floyd. And I can't tell you how many stories I got where people were saying, yeah, and at the end of the concert, everything's going around my head, And it's like little things like that really kind of get you to see that this wasn't just some museum artifact, that this was a living, breathing entity that took on a life of its own.
Mm-hmm. And I did, one of the little parts that I read was somebody talked about the stereo separation of that at the end of Carnival 9. And for music fans, that means a lot, just to hear it in just such a different way.
Yeah.
But you have a very special foreword on this book too.
Yeah, Carl was nice enough to write a foreword for us, and he says what we just said, that this is the fan's story. This is even though a lot of the stories are about him, it's what the fans really feel about the band, and the passion of those fans, and the depth of their love for the band it's very evident throughout the book.
And they're a band that deserves a legacy. And the fact that Carl's out there with his legacy band and doing this and just keeping this alive, to me, that there's nothing more important than just keep this going, and maybe hopefully getting out to another generation of people that hear this for the first time. And even with me hearing it, getting into it for the first time almost 20 years ago, and I was late to the party, but YouTube. I just happened to run across them on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I think I saw California Jam. Yeah. And I was like, what
blown away
am I watching? Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Yeah.
And it changed everything.
Yeah. And with all that, they're still not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And if
amazing.
Any of you are watching from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame committee, Emerson, Lake and Palmer needs to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I've had the same frustrations, but then I justify it to myself, like, well, they're too good for it. They're too good for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that's kind of how that's how I think about it. But I've been very frustrated with that. But Rob, back to you. You got to be a good musician to play Keith Emerson. That's not something that happens overnight. And a little bit about your training, your background, and why Keith Emerson.
Keith Emerson was an unobtainable goal. I mean, when I was a kid, a friend in high school said, "I just got this album. You need to hear it. You need to listen to it." And he knew that I was playing. I would play piano. I played piano since I was 4 years old. I was an ear player. But my parents, my dad was a music teacher, and he started me taking piano lessons at 4. And so through school, elementary school, junior high, high school, I would go in whenever I could find a piano. I would just sit there and just play for myself. I'd find an empty auditorium, and I would just play, and people would come and listen to me, and I would just have a lot of fun with that. But my friend Dave at the time said, I've got this album, you need to hear it. And he played me Carnival 9 on Brain Salad Surgery. And this was 1975, so the album had already been out for a couple of years. I never heard it. I was playing more stage band type stuff, jazz. But he played this for me, and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was so different from anything I had ever heard before. Mm-hmm. And, the synthesizer, yes, but also just the timing changes and the chord progressions. It was just amazing. So I found a book. They have a book of transcribed music from that era. It was the Black Book. So it was a ELP was on the cover, but it was just a black book of transcribed pieces. And the transcriptions were really good. So not being much of a reader, I would struggle through some of these compositions, and I learned to play Trilogy and Take a Pebble and The Sheriff, Jeremy Bender, through the book. And I really fell in love with this stuff. And I did it as well as I thought I could. And nobody else was playing this stuff. It was just amazing to me. As I got older, tribute bands weren't a thing when I was a kid. Tribute bands are something that came around really later, maybe in the 90s. But I got involved in bands that were playing a lot of the, and it wasn't called prog back then, it was art rock or orchestral rock. I found bands that were playing stuff that was a little more progressive, and so in high school I was playing with bands, and we were playing Carnival 9 Part 1, we would do a Renaissance piece, we would do some Heart, which isn't really prog, but they have some interesting timing changes. And I was playing with this stuff. I always wanted to be able to do a band playing just Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff, but I could never learn the stuff well enough to do it, first of all, and you couldn't find the musicians to play it with. And even if I found a drummer, so I had drummers that were really good, you couldn't find somebody that could sound like Greg Lake or play bass and guitar like him. It was just, his voice was like syrup. It was just, it was like, again, like nothing else that was around at the time. As I got older, I've always had music in the background. I've done music playing with prog bands and cover bands and all sorts of bands on the side, having a full-time job during the day, playing music at night. When Keith Emerson took his life in 2016, a bass player friend of mine, Eddie Wenzel, who was he was the bass player for Cyndi Lauper back when she was in Flyer, Blue Flame, I think it was. But he was good friends with Cyndi Lauper, and he was mostly a blues bass player. After Keith took his life, Eddie called me and he said, you know, you've wanted to do ELP music forever, and now's the time to shit it off the pot. You know, he said, you really should do it now. And Greg Lake had just passed when he called me. So it was like, they're gone, this music is going to die. So you've wanted to do this for a long time, do it. I said, well, I'll do it, Ed, but you got to play bass. And he's a blues bass player. So he said, all right. And we set about trying to find a singer. We found a singer and a guitarist. No, he was a bass player. So we found a guitarist that could sing. We did it as a four-piece initially. So, because Eddie wasn't as much of a singer, he wasn't a Greg Lake singer. But, so we found a fourth piece. I found somebody that was reasonably okay enough to cover the stuff, and I was able to actually pull the musicians together to get Manticore started. And this was the beginning of a dream come true for me. But it's really just playing over the years. I've played with all sorts of bands and done all sorts of music, and this, I feel, is like the culmination of a life's worth of experience. Now I get to do what I want, the way I want. This is a project that I started, and it's a labor of love, but it's took a whole lifetime to get to this point.
and it's not just the skill of playing, but the technology side of this. They get the right tone.
Yeah.
And just to talk, can you tell us a little bit about just some of the equipment, or just
Sure.
how to do all that? 'Cause
Well, it all comes back to my ear, because as a kid, I was an ear player. I would hear something on the radio, and I would play it on the piano. And that was when my dad started me taking piano lessons. So I hear things maybe differently than a lot of other kids did at the time. And when synthesizers came out and started becoming a thing, I was able to get an octave kitten. It was the smaller version, the more affordable version of the octave cat. But I learned about synthesis as it was starting to become a mass market thing, where people were able to buy synthesizers and learn how to program them. So I learned on an octave kitten synthesizer, and basically when you have a sound, you have the basic parameters of the sound. So you have the pitch, the tone or timbre, and volume. And by manipulating those three elements, you can basically create any sound. Now, the beginning synthesizers were more simple sounds. You don't have a lot of the complex sounds or the complexities of a lot of the musical instruments that are out there. Just take a saxophone. When somebody plays a saxophone, it's not just that triangle wave or that wave shape for the sound. There are so many nuances, the growl that you get, the different sounds that you get in that sax sound. But when a synthesizer came out, you can take the basics of sound and create something that overall sounds like something else and sounds like anything else. So you can create sounds from scratch. And that was how I started working on it. As synthesizers started developing, they were really developing very quickly. Mm-hmm. By the mid 80s, you started having Yamaha, instead of working with oscillators, they were working with algorithms to create sounds. So you had the Yamaha DX7, which was a synthesizer that I could not program for the life of me because it had math involved. There were algorithms. And there was a time that my synthesizer programming skills went out the window because they were going in a different direction, away from the analog modulation. Mm-hmm. It's only maybe in the last 20 years when it's come back and analog sounds have become more in vogue. But I trained myself. And I found that a lot of other people, a good friend of mine, Jack Hotop, who is he was the head programmer for Korg. And he was with that company from when they started. He basically taught himself to program the same way, but he managed to get a career out of it by learning to program these synthesizers and create sounds for the instruments. I didn't go that route because I was just playing music. It's something that I learned from the ground up, and so I kind of stayed with it enough to get a little better and a little better. My programming skills just improved over time. But by hearing the stuff and being able to break down the sounds, I could copy a lot of the sounds that Keith had on some of his great synthesizer pieces. I was able to recreate those sounds instead of having a big beast, a big monster Moog, I had a little thing, but I was still able to get those sounds. So it was just something that came with ear training and practice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that is going to take years and years of this. I'm just going to kind of shift gears back to you for a moment, Bruce, and talk about.
It's not all about me.
I'm just trying to split my time as best I possibly can. But anything that surprised you about what you found in these stories that were coming into you? Anything that stuck out? Anything? And you don't have to go into detail because we want the reader to read the book,
Absolutely,
obviously.
of course, yeah.
But
Yeah,
anything that,
yeah. Well, we talked about the musicianship that came out of that. I was very struck by a number of stories. Sarah D. Baker, for example, who finishes the book. Sarah is a very young lady who was not even alive when Emerson, Lake and Palmer were playing.
No, she's 23.
23 years old. And like you, she came across Emerson, Lake and Palmer through YouTube and has become a fanatic. And that story just has kind of stayed with me. Stories by the Nodo brothers, Chris and Andrew from Canada, how they started off as fans, and now both of them are actually working with Carl Palmer's legacy.
And Chris Noto is also the ELP archivist.
That's right, yeah. And so again, these are people that have gone from being just fans to being a part of the story now, and which is, I think, is fascinating. Love some of Frank Askew's stories as well. Frank plays in Naughty's Puncture, which is a British Emerson, Lake and Palmer tribute band. And
they've been around since 1985.
Yeah.
Doing Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah, and Frank has been very close with the band throughout the years, and got some very nice stories about personal interactions with the bands.
Mm-hmm. He was Carl's drum tech for a while.
Drum tech, that's correct. And so there's like little nuggets here and there in the story that kind of leap out at you, and just like I said, it makes it more than just a formal history of the band.
Mm-hmm. And I think even to give a shout out to my YouTube friend Graham Allen, I think did you get a contribution?
I think I did. Yeah.
And he had some interesting run-ins that he kind of told me about, and he's a drummer himself, and he did videos of kind of taking apart Carl's skills and things like that.
Sure.
So I definitely wanted to kind of mention him here because he's like the ultimate ELP fan as well.
Yeah.
What's next for Manticore? We're in February of 2026. What do you plan on doing with the band?
Well, the band is still plugging away. So the way the band is set up, we play roughly once a month, and we'll be playing all throughout 2026. We have shows booked at Daryl's House in Pauling, Elkton Music Hall down in Elkton, Maryland. Pennsylvania, Jersey. We've got a whole bunch of shows. If you go to our website, www.manticoreny.com, you can find out where we're going to be playing and what's coming up. And also, if anybody wants to contact me and give me their email address, we can put you on the mailing list and send out the monthly newsletter. And we'd love to have you come down to a show.
Great, and I'll put in the description, I'll make sure that I put your website on there so they can click a link to it and check it out and go through it and even just get a glimpse of some of the things that you guys do, which is just fantastic. And we're talking real authentic ELP here, fantastic music. And your book, just give us, again, a recap. Where can we find this book so we can read this book and enjoy it?
Okay, so it's available through Burning Shed through the UK. That's where you get the limited edition, numbered, hardbound edition of the book. It's available worldwide through all the internet retailers. Available in the U.S. now too. If you call your local bookstore, they can order it for you. The place to go to get information about that is Spenwood Books. Which we'll have a link for that, and also brucepegg.com, BRUCEPEGG.com, which is my own personal website.
All right, and I'll put that in the description for us. Well, I can't thank you two enough for coming here. And I wish I could just video everything that went on in this basement over the last couple hours because...
Well, maybe not everything.
Because it's been an absolute blast, and I really hope that we can do this again sometime because this video is just not going to do justice of the things that we talked about and what we could talk about.
We're all local here, so next time we can do this with a couple of beers and in a pub.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, we're getting back together, people, so stay tuned.
Nice.
Okay. So, hey, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll be getting back together at some point in time.
Play me off, Johnny!